This computer.
Oh, look at that.
Here we go. It's recorded. Michelle,
All,
how are you?
all official and stuff.
Great. How are you? Nice to meet
Good.
you.
Utah, huh? Nice. It's
Meeting
nice.
the celebrity.
Celebrity? You kidding me? Yeah, that should hit my wife here. That should vomit. That would be hilarious. You know, out in Utah. And Eric, what's up, man? Have we spoke before? Were you on?
No, never spoke. One of my buddies um, told me to join the school, and it was just perfect timing. I'm driving, and I wanted to check it out.
Nice, nice. Well, happy to have you, man. I can see
Thank
you're
you.
in California. It's not dark and cold yet.
Yep.
I know.
Uh,
I saw the sun over there. I was a little
now
jealous.
it's super bright, it's perfect, like 65 degrees. I love it.
Yeah, that's not how it is here. Mike
it's
Patrick's.
it's not like that here in New York either.
Trying to get this to work. That might be your sister, Peter. I think Lisa's trying to hop on. She's hilarious.
Oh, even better. Beautiful.
That's great. That's great. Oh, actually, you know what? That might be her down there, which is cool. So, all right, cool. Well, it's 8:02, so we'll get it going. Peter, thanks for joining. Just so you guys all know, I know I put up a group post about it, but Peter, obviously, we're family. He's my father-in-law, which is cool. He's the one who gave me my start in real estate. He owns quite a bit more real estate than I do, for many different reasons. One is because he's a lot older, but that being said, he's significantly more experienced.
This is Dan.
Yes. Hello.
Oh,
How you doing? So yeah, he kind of gave me my start, to be honest. I started dating his daughter, when we got sober together, and we were really nobody's in the space, certainly nobody's in the real estate space. And we started buying multifamilies together, and then we kind of switched to this behavioral health uh, niche. But he's actually going out. We're buying a 16 unit in Cleveland. When's the closing, Peter? When is it?
It got pushed off because of some title issues they found. So it's been we signed an extension this morning to the end of November. It's probably going to be 10 days or so.
Yeah, whatever. All right.
The seller was a little cranky at his attorney today.
So do you have to go back?
No, I already told the bank they'd have to send someone to the house to do a remote, like
Oh,
we
okay.
did last time on the refinances. I'm not.
Oh yeah, I did it at like the Mexican restaurant. I remember
Yep.
that. Yeah, that was annoying. Anyway, so yeah, Peter owns over 400 units, maybe a little less now because you've offloaded some, but I don't know.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. I think your story is really interesting because you bought property starting in 1997 and you built a solid little business, and you made some mistakes and some big mistakes, which cost you dearly, which you can talk about, but you didn't give up, and then started buying again in 2011. He's built a big portfolio, and then obviously he owns 50% of the company that I'm building. So he's in this exact same niche as well. So he can offer a lot of experience and information about the niche we're in. He can answer the questions just like I can, but also with a significantly more wealth of knowledge in terms of regular residential real estate. And then also when it comes to meeting operators and networking, that's the stuff that I do in the business. So you guys are in good hands there. When it comes to raising capital and you start talking about, people telling me, why don't you do a DSCR loan, or why don't you do this? Peter's a really good wealth of information because he handles most of, if not all of the banking relationships. Like today, I closed on a building. I was just told where to go and sign my name. Like that's kind of as far as it goes for me in this. And I'm just being honest with you. So I handle the front end part of it. But with that being said, Peter, feel free to introduce yourself a little bit. I know I just kind of did, and then from there we can open up to like a little Q&A or however we want to do it. So go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, my wife and I started originally in real estate back in 1997. As Dan said, we spent 3 or 4 years talking about getting into real estate, raising some money, putting it aside, getting scared, giving it back to everybody. Been at 256 units, and then if anybody's been involved old enough to remember firsthand what happened in 2005 to 2007, we got caught in that. We had some partners who didn't have the same thought process as we did, so we put everything up on the market. We tried to sell and get out of things. We didn't get out unscathed. Cost me my primary residence that foreclosed on. But then in 2009, got back in with with a partner who, the only partner that thinks the same way I do. Did 6 to 7 flips, and then we got back into the multifamily game. So as Dan said, we've got, right now we have 367 units. We just sold 54 and get out of one county in Massachusetts that we've had some real challenges in after COVID. And then we started this business with Dan and Michaela almost 5 years ago, Dan, right? And
Yeah.
we start off buying small multifamilies. We've got 21 units, multifamilies. Then we switched to the behavioral health stuff, and we've got 18 of those, spread across 5 states. Most of them are sober houses. One's a certified female facility here in Massachusetts, and we've got a couple more of those in the pipeline. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride back a decade and a half ago, but it's all good now.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And then with obviously on the behavioral health side, like I said, you guys can feel free to ask any questions, really, because there are questions like when you guys ask me about raising money, there are times where I'm not afraid to defer and be like, look, I'm not Pace Morby, I'm not these guys, I'm not subject to masters or raising capital masters. I'm good at finding operators and putting, fire deals together. That's what I do. So and then I kind of hand it off to other people, and that's what kind of makes the team, really, really grow. You need a team to do things at scale, at least, but to do one or two of them, all you need is balls and a little dough, or access to dough. So, but that being said, if you guys have the feature to put the hand up, feel free to start putting up. If anyone has questions, we can get it rocking and rolling that way if you want. Oh, there's Victor. What's up,
A
dude?
couple people have sent questions in, Dan. I'm seeing some stuff scroll across the bottom of the screen.
Oh, how did you find your first partner? And what did you realize were the criteria? Peter, I'd probably answer that from an MGEM's perspective, starting in 2011, but answer it however you want.
Sure. So from a regular residential real estate, my partner is someone used to be my boss. I'm a retired controller, so I'm a math guy. Frank was with CFO at one of the places I worked before, so he's a math guy. We built a financial model. I know a lot of people talk about profit per door or cap rates or return on cash, and they're all good measurements, but they're not what we use. We built a model after 2005 that said once we bought a building and we repositioned it, and our definition of reposition is 12 to 18 months where you've gone through and done as much work as you can without basically throwing everybody out of the building and repositioned the rents and then refinanced it to put bank financing back on it. The building had to support itself 50% vacant. And that's our model. Like, we if we can't get to that model, we don't buy. We will buy a lot of stuff, 2010 to 2015, 16. Obviously, COVID put everything on hold. And now, in a lot of areas, prices are just, especially in Massachusetts, they're just crazy. And you can't get anything to fit. We have a group of investors we deal with. So we were doing all of our deals all cash. We just come in, buy the building, pay them interest only. In the beginning, the rates were back in 2010, 2011, they were, between 9.5 and 11. And then as rates went down, they came down, and we were getting 100% financing from these guys at 7.5 for a while. Now the rates are back up. So, that rate fluctuates. We have a really great group of investors we deal with. So that's how we look for deals. That's how we find stuff. That's on the regular residential side. So most of our stuff is straight out residential. We've got a couple small buildings, a couple threes and a couple fours. Everything else is 6 units and above. And we've got a handful that are mixed use, typical downtown areas, 4 or 5, stores on the first floor with apartments on the second and third above it.
This one says here, and I can hear this guy James says, how do you market your sober living properties to ensure they reach those in need of a supportive living environment? So obviously, Peter, kind of inform him. This will be good to have him answer it. You guys have heard me answer these questions before about how we don't run the homes and we market it. So kind of explain that to James.
Sure. So as Dan said, we don't run the houses. We're the brick and mortar guys. So we'll go out and we reach out various ways to operators. We either meet them from referrals from other operators. We talk to state certified people that run the state certifications in states, and we'll get recommendations from them. And then we go meet the operator and talk to the operator about, what's your criteria? What are you looking to do? What area are you looking to do it in? Like we do it bottom up, right? We find the operator first, and then we build a financial model for them, based on where do you want to own a home? How many people would you like to have in the home? And a lot of times that's an education for the operator. They're like, I'd really like to do this, pick an area. I really like to do this just outside of Boston. That's why I want to buy a single family and have like 6 or 7 people in it. And we have to educate them and go like, yeah, that math is never going to work. So we do that first. We talk with them. We find out if they've already got a home or not. If this is the first time, we talk with the state agency and make sure they're someone that state agency will kind of put the stamp of approval on. So we do due diligence on them. And then after we get all those details worked out, we go and we start searching for a property for them. And a lot of times we talk with people who have a couple of these who want to go to different areas. Like we have people in New Hampshire who want to go down on the South Shore in Massachusetts to an area that's just outside of Boston. That's too expensive. We told them right out, like, you want to be in Quincy, Braintree. Like we're not like, it's going to be a needle in a haystack for us to find you a building that's going to make any financial sense. That has to make sense. We have to be able to buy the building and do the renovation and hand you a turnkey product. And we have to be able to make a profit margin, but you also have to be able to make a profit. It has to be sustainable. So if everybody doesn't win, nobody wins. And that's how we build it.
Yep. That makes sense. Hopefully that sounds familiar to people who have been on a few of those. Might be a little more professional than the way I talk, but you get the idea. Peter, when you got started, where were you finding capital to start? Actually, I'm interested in this question. So I know you met Frank. Frank is the guy that you partnered with and built the big company. Frank had access to capital, so it was a really good partnership. You had the real estate experience, he had that. But take us back to 97. I know times have changed. You didn't have the internet. But when you bought some of your first buildings, Chelsea, Mass, how did you fund that? Because to be honest with you, I don't even know.
Yeah, so back then when we did it, it was easier back then. Lending was very loose. As the term I would use. You could buy 3-family homes, and lenders would let you do it with 10% down as an investment property all day long. Rates were at that time still regular banking rates at that time for anybody who was in business back in the 90s were above 10. But those first 2 buildings we bought in Chelsea, like I took a $50,000 equity line on my house, and I bought 2 houses in the $130,000 to $150,000 range, and just wrote a 10% down check and some closing costs, and away we went. And then, we had some partners who all came in, and everybody contributed $50,000. So there was about $400,000 that was contributed. Nobody had a ton of cash, but back then you could buy all the way up to a 6-family with 10% down. And then there were lenders back then that were doing 70% and 75% LTV on a loan. But if you put 10% down, they'd let the seller hold a 10 to 15% second on like a 10 or 12 unit building. So there was a lot of that going on back then. So that's how we did it back then. And then it was easy. You just repositioned the properties. We bought 16. We bought a couple 3-families in Chelsea in the $130,000, $140,000 range. And 2 or 3 years later, these properties were worth pretty close to double. Things like took off in Chelsea. It was just crazy. And so you just go back and refinance them and, take out what you want. We've never taken out more than our initial capital. So if I bought a building for $150,000 and I put 10% down, or even now you put in 20% down, 25% down, when I refinance that, I never take more than my own capital out. I take it back to the original purchase price, and now my cash on cash return is infinite. But I don't go, let me take another $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and do that across 10 buildings, because that can get you into trouble.
Is that what happened in the early 2000s?
That's what happened in the early 2000s. A couple of things happened in the early 2000s. A lot of these loans started to reset. People started to get foreclosed on in 2004, 2005. Rental rates went down. Vacancies went up because people couldn't afford things and they were moving back in with their families. And then we had a conversation as a group that said, okay, we're carrying roughly 9.8, 9.9% interest on this entire portfolio. We should find a bank and refinance the whole thing as a blanket mortgage and drive our debt down. And, there was 14 of us at the time as partners. 10 people were like, nope, if we can't take out money every month that we've been drawing, we don't want to do this anymore. Went to a vote and everything went on the market. It was the stupidest decision that could have been made. But, when you get outvoted, you get outvoted.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Put it all in the market and sell, and away you go.
Chelsea
and then it fell apart after that. Like we had a couple of brothers. One brother had to go to the bank because the other brother was going to a branch and withdrawing money from an account. He was basically stealing money out of an account. Like it got ugly pretty fast.
Yeah, that can happen with partnerships.
Yeah,
for sure.
that can happen.
But hopefully that answers that question. Cassandra asks, how do you build relationship with the bank for the refinance on these group homes or sober living? What language are you using when starting the refinance so that they are considering the lease income that doesn't reflect a typical traditional rental?
Oh, great question. So you have to sometimes you have to educate the lenders, right? When you're talking to the lenders, they do residential appraisals, which are based on sales comps, and they do commercial appraisals, which are based more on the income approach. What you have to get them to agree to and they have to understand is these are commercial appraisals, right? These are residential properties sometimes or a lot of times with commercial tenants. You have a tenant in there who's on a 5 to 10 or 15-year lease who's triple net, and they've got to figure that out. They have to be able to talk to their appraisers and go, no, I don't want you to do a residential appraisal. I want a commercial appraisal. And that's how you start the conversation with them. And they have to, and once if they've done it before, they get it. And, business like ours is getting out there. I know we did a deal. Remember, we did the deal in Orange, Dan, at 145 East Main Street. The guy who came and did the appraisal said, I'll give you both. Here's the sales appraisal and here's the commercial appraisal. So, this two family that we bought that we converted to a sober home that we bought for 125,000 and put like 40 grand into it. The sales approach, it came out at like $310,000. And the bank said, well, we'll give you 70% cash out on that. And we were like, fine, we only want our original money back. But from a commercial appraisal, it was like, well, this guy was paying $4,500 a month on a triple net lease. The building appraised at 609. They were like, well, we'll give you 70% of that. We were like, no, thanks. So that's how we start that conversation with them. Is it's a commercial appraisal, so there has to be significant weight given to the commercial lease, which leads to a lot of times they're going to want to talk to that entity. They're going to want to see what their business is like. They're going to they're going to want to be like, kind of like, if you leased a 50,000 square foot building to Amazon and you went back to your bank would be like, okay, we know who Amazon is. But if you leased it to some venture backed company, they're going to be like, well, we need financials on that. We need to talk to someone because we don't know what's going on. We don't know the financial strength of this company. They're going to ask some of the same questions about some of your sober home operators, as they should. And you should know that stuff before you get to that point when you're refinancing. Because you should be asking that question as well. You should, Dan and I do it. Like, okay, like, what do you have? Like, I'm not asking for you to fill out a financial statement, but it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to get up and running. If you don't put anybody in this house for 90 days, do you have enough cash in a checking account? Do you have access to funds to carry this? Or are you basically having me, go out and spend anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million for a house for you, and you're hoping you put people in it to pay your rent? Because that's a problem.
I agree. Cassandra Gray, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for that, Peter. And just to kind of follow up on that, definitely I understand what you're talking about with the commercial appraisal. What my experience has been when talking with my local banks and, and nationwide banks as well, is they're just uncomfortable with that business model simply because they don't want to foreclose on a home where they need to boot out a ton of people, right? With that type of living situation. I think that was kind of like their main, and it took me a while. Like I have a boarding house here in Anchorage. It took me a while to get one of my local banks to refinance it. So have you overcome that objection in any specific way? Especially back in the earlier days when you were really building up, those relationships to refinance these types of properties?
Sure. Another great question. I tell them, I said, okay, well, what's the difference if I have a sober home with 15, 16 guys in it, or a rooming house with 20 rooms, or if I have a 3-family piece of property that's got 3 families with 3 kids each? And either way, if you foreclose on the property, you're evicting people. So you get, sometimes, again, when I say you need to educate them, it's asking a pointed question that makes them think. It's not like looking at them and going, what are you, stupid? It's like, what difference does it make if you throw out 3 families or if you throw out 16 men or women who are trying to get sober? You still have to evict a bunch of people. Oh, and by the way, you're only evicting the operator. He's the lessee. They have to get all the people out. But you just need to lead them sometimes and say, well, I'm a little confused. If I had a 3-family home, or if I had this, like if I had a 3-family home and I made it this, what if I had a 6-unit building and you foreclosed on it? You'd have 6 families you'd have to evict. How does that make that any different from a process standpoint for you based on the fact? And then they go, well, it's different. Well, how is it different? And that basically comes down to they think it's a different process from an eviction standpoint. They're like, well, all these people are in recovery. What am I going to do? Well, no, you have a commercial person who has a lease. You're going to go in there. You're going to go John or Jane Smith Sober Living LLC and all others, and you're going to start the process. And when you go through whatever the court process is in your state, and you get the piece of paper from the court that says, "Yep, here you go. Give this to a constable, sheriff, whoever you have," and they go to the house like everybody needs to go. It's the same process. It would be just like renting to Amazon, and Amazon decided not to pay you. You'd go through the process, and then you'd get a piece of paper, and you can't imagine going to Amazon's offices, but they'd go there and be like, all you people need to leave. All you employees, pick up your shit and get out. So,
Right.
but it's an education for them to be like, well, you can ask questions. I don't understand. This is no different. It's no different than a normal eviction. Commercial evictions, at least in the state of Massachusetts, are much easier to do than residential, because commercial tenants are presumed to be more intelligent about the law, and in Massachusetts specifically, they have less rights.
Okay.
You're a business of some sort. Like in Massachusetts, if you're a residential tenant, if you're first, last, and security, I have to put your security deposit in a separate account. I have to pay interest on it. I have to pay interest on your last month's rent. You're a commercial tenant. You give me first, last, and security. Thanks for the cash. There's no rules around that because they treat them very differently. You'd have to get educated about your state, about how they handle that. But most states treat commercial tenants differently. They treat them like you're a business owner. You don't need the same protections as Susie and Johnny and their two kids do, from the big bad landlord.
What's good too is
Right.
typically, right, if you're someone living in a sober home, it's not that difficult. You're paying $1,700 a month. It's not hard to find another one. They can go to the state certified agency and say, hey, we're getting foreclosed on. And there's going to be like a gang of people that are there to support them. Some of them will unfortunately self-select themselves out and use that as an excuse to just go. Like it's kind of sad, but the average, it's not hard to evict people in a sober house. It's so easy typically to just pick up and move. They don't have a lot. Their kids aren't living there. The operator, who's the one you actually have to evict, doesn't live there 99% of the time. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but you kind of educate. He made a great point. You just sort of be confident with the banks and educate the banks on why this is secure, why this makes sense. And we haven't really run into issues. And for what it's worth, we do own boarding houses as well. Boarding houses are, bar none, the hardest to purchase from a lending standpoint, the hardest to refinance, the hardest to manage, and the hardest to find insurance. And they have it makes sense, right? Boarding houses don't have the rules. There's no chores. There's no family atmosphere. There's none of that involved.
Yeah.
So once these temps, like we found Jean D'Arc Credit Union, and Peter, you can speak to this. They loved it. They loved the idea of being a part of the community. They actually have this, they had some sort of program where they go into schools and try to educate people on financial education. Obviously, the end goal is to get deposits, right? They want them to come to your bank, but they wanted to come into some of the sober houses. And now I'm not saying every bank's going to react like that, but you also have to remember with our strategy, we're buying this and we're seasoning it for 12 months. So they're not just well, who's this operator? It's well, look at this. This has been our experience with them. They've paid. Right. And then after you've done 3 or 4 of them, now it's oh, it's Dan and Peter again with another react.
Yeah.
So
Dan, that's a great point with John D'Arc specifically, because in the beginning they were, as you've said, they're a little hesitant. They're like, well, I'm like, okay. And we go to another bank. We go to NBT, we go to East Boston Savings Bank. We have other, and then they had a full-blown detox that was built right across the street from their corporate office. And that one of their board members was on the board of the detox, who came to a board meeting and said, we should really look into this. These places are really profitable. So our representative called and wanted to take Dan and I, took me out to lunch and said, I need you to explain this to us. And Dan and I went there and met with her and the CFO of the credit union and said, well, this is how this works. And when we brought them that deal in Central Mass, the CFO was looking at the people in the room going, okay, hold on a second. You bought a building for $255,000. It was a rooming house, 2 levels, 13,000 square feet. You did a $900,000 build out, and now you have a local nonprofit that's been in business since 1972 that's renting the building from you for $25,000 a month triple net for 15 years, and you only want your $1,058,000 back on a building that you have an appraisal from from TD Bank did the appraisal and the building appraised at $2,940,000. Like the CFO looked around the road like, well, we do this deal all day long. So like, they once they get to that point where they start to understand it, it's very easy for them to go, oh, okay, send me over the lease. And John Dark and our other banks always they want to get on the phone with the operator, like, who's the operator? Can I get their tax returns? We can't give those out. We go, yeah, here's the guy. Give him a call. You call the operator, like they're going to call you and they want your tax returns. They want to know how, they want to know all this stuff, and you get someone that's got a couple houses, or they have a good job, or they're, we've got one operator who's a doctor, right? So, it's going to be easy when we go to refinance that building. They look at it, oh, like, he's a doctor, he's in the field. That helps them. You vet these people beforehand. You'd be like, oh, well, some guy wants to open up a sober home. The guy doesn't have $10,000 in his checking account. I'm probably not going to do a deal with him, because when it comes time to refinance, the bank's going to go like, yeah, not so much.
That
That's
we
fair.
did that. Sam had no money. Maybe he does now. We've taken that risk before. So, that's how we've learned these. But for the next question, I'm going to skip this first one, Marquita, and do the second one for now. How do you identify opportunities in the behavioral health sector, and what are the unique challenges or benefits that you found in this niche?
So identifying opportunities is just like looking at regular residential real estate, right? You have to look at stuff, you have to identify, you have to run the numbers, right? Not all buildings work, not all operators work. When I say it's like turning over stones, you pick up a stone, you look and see what's underneath it. It's the same thing. It's just you run a different math calculation. So it's a little bit different that way. You can run into pros and cons. People can talk a good game. And, if you don't do your due diligence, and we did some of this where Dan and I got what I want to call happy feet with people who talked a really good game, who were terrible at running their business, couldn't do a build out, overspent, stole some of our money. Like, we had to go down and call a locksmith, change the locks, drag the dumpster out into the street and be like, get off our property and don't come back. So you learn that to do which is why we continue to go back to vet the operator, have a conversation with the operator, and know all of that stuff about the operator beforehand, before you start looking around at property.
Yep. And then obviously we don't have to go down a rabbit hole, but marketing to operators is not super difficult. I found finding replacement operators is not the hardest thing. It can be difficult, but you can always backtrack to regular residential real estate. You can always exit out. And if you lose a few bucks like that, that can happen in this business as you grow. Like, things happen like any property, but it usually happens at scale. When you buy 4 a quarter for 4 straight quarters, you're going to run into way more problems. You're just going to make more mistakes. That's how it goes. When you strategically buy one, get it stabilized, and then buy another one, which is probably the smarter way to do it than what we did. That can happen. And then obviously the city, the tangent I'm talking about, from our experience, and I think Peter can speak to this, buying it in not a rough city in terms of location, but a city that is anti-sober living for whatever reason and willing to dig their heels in the ground, bar none, the biggest issue you can run into with this, because it's just not a challenge that can be accepted with locksmiths, dumpsters, quick, brutal emails from lawyers to just scare the hell out of some scumbag operator to getting the heck out of your house and finding a new one. When the city doesn't want to play ball for whatever the reason is, typically it's a neighbor issue. By far your biggest challenge with this.
Yeah, and Dan's right on that. We've had some challenges in some of these places. Some places, they love sober living. They know what it is. They understand it. Some places, there's tons of Nashua, New Hampshire. There's tons of sober living up there. The city's very welcoming of sober living. It's a big part of their community. And we bought a single family house in a neighborhood, and the neighbors just lost their minds. Hired an attorney, went to the zoning board, and the zoning board repealed our building permit 6 weeks after the building department had issued it to us, and we had to sue them. And then, of course, the lawyers get involved, and 6-7 weeks later, their lawyers are calling our lawyer going, we want to settle this because we filed a federal fair housing discrimination case. And their lawyers, city council for the city, and the outside lawyers look to the zoning board and go, you guys excuse my language, you guys drastically fucked this up. Like, you're gonna get sued. This, like, you're gonna get smacked from HUD, from Federal Fair Housing. You're gonna owe these guys significant amount of money, like 6 figures, possibly 7. Like, you're discriminating against people that are protected under federal housing for people with disabilities. And you gave them a permit and they did a bunch of work, and you basically went back on it because people in the neighborhood were upset about it. And they came back to us, like I said, less than 6 weeks. They were like, we want to settle. We'll give you a permit back. We'll write you this check for your lost revenue. Like, sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah.
But if you're doing everything right, if you're talking, your zoning, and you deal with an attorney if you have questions who knows sober living, who knows the zoning law. It's like in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, it's different. Massachusetts, we know you have more than 6 unrelated people living in a sober house. You use a sprinkler system, no questions asked, and a fire system, no questions asked. Completely different in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, you may need a sprinkler system, but it's going to be for more than 12 people, and you need just a little sprinkler head over the heating system that can run off domestic water. It's completely different, but you have to know that stuff.
Yeah, they have a variance. New Hampshire has a variance that they built in for recovery.
Yeah, you just have to know that stuff so that when they start pushing back. Because a lot of times what we found, and Dan can attest to this, is these people in these cities, a lot of them don't have specific zoning that talks about sober homes. They have rooming houses, they have boarding houses, they have other stuff, but it really doesn't fit into any sort of a box they could check and go, oh yeah, I can go to section G and I can read all about this. So they get confused. They start throwing boarding house, rooming house at you because they think that's where it fits, and it doesn't. And then, again, you have to have an education process, which sometimes it can be a conversation or a couple of conversations, and sometimes it involves getting attorneys who know what they're talking about involved to write them a letter and go, well, no, here's the federal fair housing law, and here's where this fits, and you have to be prepared for that because time is money.
Yeah, no, 100%. You can win all those battles. It's just you want to mitigate. You don't want it to be your first deal.
Sure.
It's a huge pain in the ass, and you're like, oh,
Yep.
This guy Dan sucks. How did you persuade Frank to partner with you?
Pretty simple. Dan and I just sat down with a presentation that showed him math. And he's a pretty bright guy. He knew about what we were doing. He'd seen some of the deals. He specifically saw the deal in Central Mass with that big nonprofit and had walked that building with me 3 weeks before and had said, this is a grand slam because you can anchor your new life business around this building because it's that big of a deal. It's that profitable. And he compared it to our business, which at the time was 430 units. And he said, we have never purchased a regular residential building that will perform anywhere near as good as this building will perform for you guys for the next 2 to 3 decades. So it was pretty easy sell for, hey, we want to bring some of this capital over here. We want to give you ownership in this business to bring the capital. Your job is to go raise money. Here's the offer. Here's what we're looking to do. We sat down at a Chili's and he was all in before we were done. I'm like, hey, you need to take this home. You need to think about it. He goes, I don't need to take it home and think about it. He goes, I'm in. He got to work.
We gave 10% of our company away to someone who has access to a lot of private money. Yep. Once we kind of built the model and showed that it worked, which is cool. What's his name? Besnick said Chelsea, Mass. Yes, it is Chelsea, Mass. We were talking about earlier. Will you lease to new operators? We've talked about this at length. Do you like to see an operator with experience and the know-how?
Yeah, so another great question. Our original model 2 or 3 years ago was we didn't rent to anybody who didn't already have at least one certified sober house. I'm going to be careful to make that point. We don't rent to people who don't get their houses state certified by the certifying body, MASH, NH Core, whoever. 3.5 years ago, we didn't rent. We if you want a second or a third or a fourth, we'll rent to you. But if it's your first, go get your own house first and then come back and talk to us. And then we changed that. Dan and I had some conversations. We were like, well, there's a lot of people that want to get into this. And we're basically just not talking to them, and we're losing the opportunity to potentially do business with some of these people because of a preconceived notion in our minds that because they never did it before, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, well, at some point in time, I bought a piece of real estate and I became a landlord and I never knew what I was doing before then. So we talked about it and put some processes in place with, talking with state agencies, doing some due diligence on these people, and then obviously directing them to, like, the doctor I talked about in Haverhill. He talked to the state agency in Massachusetts, and he has to go through a training course that he had to go through for 2 days. That's part of the certification process. So we changed that. Again, just you have to do your due diligence. There's good people out there. There's bad people out there. There's good regular residential tenants. There are tenants that I'd stuff in a barrel and roll them into the sea if I could. You just have to do your own due diligence.
Yeah. Talk about how we come up with the pricing, right? So I'll give you an example. Say it's a $400,000 purchase. It's going to be a 16-bed sober house. Operator charges $200 a week. How do you come up with that number?
Yeah, so we take the what the operator charges. We do 200 times 16. We annualize that number, and we take 45% of that, and then that's a starting point for a negotiation for us. The calculation has been, we get to figure out, can we buy the house? Can we make our profit margin? But then out of that other 55% that the owner has, they've got operating costs. They've got, we give them 8 to 10% for utilities. They're going to have another 5 to 8 to 10% based on what they provide for people to run the program. Some people it's 3 or 4 if they only do cups, but some people will give toiletries and other stuff. And then you have to give them, they're going to give a free room to the manager. They're not going to be full all the time. Hold on a second.
You're good. Yeah, we just did it's all relative too, because like we just did a deal, the one we closed on today, 22 beds, 21 that are actually paying because they have a manager, and we're charging them $5,500 a month because we got the deal pretty cheap. It was relatively turnkey. So I mean his gross operating income is probably 18,000. So that's really only 33%. But this is a guy we've already had a house with for almost a year. We hit a home run on him on the first one. I kind of made a promise I'd give them a little bit better deal. And, as long as I'm getting my good returns, if they're paying me $5,500 a month rent and I'm clearing over $2,000 a month in profit after we refinance every single dollar that we put into it out, and the operator can come in there and make $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month, it's great because you want them profitable. Like we've done deals that were friggin' home runs on paper, but it was horrible for them. They just didn't do their math and it didn't end well for us. So at the end of the day, they need to make money, right? Because you're telling them we're going to provide you a turnkey business where you can make, $2,500 to $6,000 a month, like depending on how the deal works out. So if you don't do that, and sometimes that's not always your fault, but if the operator's not making money, it becomes your fucking problem.
Yep. Yep.
So it's all relative. And then with rehabs, like, how I came up with the 25,000 a month, I found out that they're a nonprofit. This is the kind of research that I did. I found out they're a nonprofit. The guy foolishly told me we only like to make 4 to 5% profit, like total. So I knew their reimbursement rate was $300 a day. I knew, he kind of gave me ballpark because I was asking questions. How expensive is it? Like, what's it going to cost you per month to run this? And I just did a calculation and came up with the highest number. And guess what? 25,000, by the way, that's the number I came up with. And that's the number they said yes to. So it makes you wonder if I said 28,
Yeah, again, it has to be, the math has to work for everybody. It has to be fair. That's a different program. They've got 30 full-time staff that, they have a couple nurses and a doctor on staff. That's a different animal. And so it's a different conversation. But again, as Dan said, there has to be profit in it for them. Most of these people don't do it to make money. They have, a different desire. Has a place in their heart. Over 95% of the people we deal with are in recovery, and that's why they do this. They've been in places that they just like, wow, was a terrible experience I had, and I really want to help people not go through what I went through. But it's, sometimes they're like, oh, like we have to talk to them and be like, no, this has to be sustainable for you. Like, I don't want you to come back in 5 years and go like, I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm having a lot of fun and I'm helping a lot of people. But like in 5 years, I haven't made $5,000 total in 5 years. That's not sustainable. They're going to be like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. People only want to give back to the community for so long.
Yeah.
Like that's what I found. Everyone's a Mother Teresa until
they're not.
their car breaks down. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality of it. I have come across a former assisted living facility for sale. I have not yet found an operator yet, so have not been looking for anything. Would you go to an operator and suggest the assisted living facility, or wait to find an operator first?
I would do both. We're big believers in you always go to find the operator first. But if you've got an existing operator that you think may be interested in the building, that's a conversation you can have as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you walk us through the process of how you do the funding from beginning through refinance? Are you getting residential loans where you need to put 20% down? We've done that before. How
Yep.
are you getting past limits of the number of properties you can buy conventionally? Assume that's a lending limit, or probably cash we have on hand. And what do you think about using creative finance in this space? How are you funding the down payment and renovation budget? How long does it take before you can stabilize and refinance? What type of lender do you use for refinancing? Do you use with what type of terms?
Yeah, so unless you're doing, we deal with a lot of smaller local banks. So we don't, and we're our refinances. So everything we do is all in a corporate name. It's all in an LLC. So we haven't run across any bank that's limited us on the number of loans because everything's in an LLC. So you don't, when you have these loans in your personal name, you bump into that. You bump into that with FHA. You bump into that with a bunch of other things. We don't do that. We put everything in an LLC so that none of our personal assets are at risk. You deal with smaller banks. Sometimes you bump up against their lending limits because they can only lend so much, and that's a different conversation. When you've outgrown them, you've outgrown them. We haven't done any, quote unquote seller financing or any sort of, creative financing like that. We haven't done any deals like that. It just hasn't come up. Not that we wouldn't be open to it, but most of the time when people want to sell, they want to sell. Like Dan, I looked at the HUD statement that you signed today. Like these people that sold that building you bought in Springfield today for Mike, like they did all that work in that building, and the building was beautiful. And they did 90% of the work for us, and they walked away with like $31,000.
Yeah, I mean,
On a
creative finance, like
400,000
the
purchase.
subject to and taking over is great. Like that's the best. And Peter, we can start to explore that a little more in terms of as we grow out in Ohio with regular residential real estate. The only issue I could see you finding with the sober living is if you get a really, really good deal. Like if you got someone who's, their purchase price area is 350,000, they're down to do a 20-bed sober house, and you can get $6,500 a month in rent. Like it's a home run. It's so friggin' easy to raise cash. It's not so easy, but it's a lot easier to raise capital. Call a guy like me who can partner with you. If then you have to find the perfect building for it, and then hope that there's somebody who will also be open to some sort of creative finance, right? Because you're adding the layer of, well, are they a distressed property owner? Do they, are they upside down on it? Do they have no equity in it? You just, because remember, our solution, at least for us, is like part of what we offer is like I could fly down to wherever you are, look at houses, and fucking buy it in 30 days. Not let me go try to do creative financing because I have no money and no access to money. It sort of kills what we're trying to do. But you guys can do it however you want.
Right. Yeah, and on some of those other questions, I know there was quite a few of them. Like most banks like to see a seasonal loan for a year. So if you buy it with cash or you get a hard money lender or someone to come in there, it's a year. That's changing a little bit. I've seen the last year to year and a half, a lot of your regional banks and some of your local credit unions have gone to 9 months. They're like, hey, we'll do this at 9 months, because they get what's going on. Hello, Lainey Grace. So this thing there's that. When if you get some of your investors, we've done this a couple of times. We have investors who will put down the deposit money. They're like, yeah, we'll put down the deposit money, and we have another entity with them, and they've got ownership, or they'll stand in second position. They're like, yeah, I'll take a 10% second, and I'll stand, behind the bank, and you have to check that out with your bank, or they'll just be like, no, you can just write up a document, and I trust you because you've done this with me before. So that's all personal relationship stuff that you build over time with people. And sometimes you have to take that question to your bank. Like a lot of times the bank will be like, well, we don't care who stands in second place because we're going to give you 75% and we're first. And sometimes the bank will be like, no, we don't want anybody doing that. So then you can have conversations with your investors about would they take a lien on another property that you have equity in, or, would it just be, you take a note that won't be on anything but you'll have a personal guarantee on it, or do they want some ownership in the building, like 5%, or 10%, and they'll put
giving
money
up equity for someone to sit in second position is great. If you have the trust, like that's a great way to do it. I see William, he's on this call, William Elias. I spoke with him today. He has access to a lot of people. Like he talked to me today about someone he knows that has $5 million from the tech industry and wants to invest in real estate, but doesn't really want to do anything, right? Like
Yeah.
you got people out there now, they're going to want 51%. But like, it just depends where you're starting. Like the more established you are as a real estate investor, the less you're going to be, the more weary you're going to be of stuff like that. But if you got no money, you come in, you own 50% of a deal. There are people out there, if you meet the right people, and guys like William get their check however they do it, whether it's a piece or like that. But those people are out there. There are guys in California with 20 million bucks that will throw you 500 grand to buy a property. If it, they're going to want their equity. And, I was talking to him about it. They're big on, they just want the depreciation, right?
Yep.
But if you can show a model that works and makes sense, that's, there is ways to raise money out there. That's why if you get good at the business, the money will come, but and the creative financing thing, I just think that's fantastic. It's just, what it is. It's difficult when you do this. You got to find the operator, find the house, make sure the numbers work, buy the property, make sure the neighborhood works. And then you throw in, and make sure we find a distressed seller who has no equity in the building.
Right.
It just adds another layer of difficulty. But
Yep.
that being said, you can always go the wholesaler route, and you can do it in reverse. Like you can find a property and then find an operator. I wouldn't close on it. That's,
Yeah.
if you do, don't come crying to me if you can't find someone.
Yeah, because we have a deal specifically like that, Dan, right? Haverhill. Dan and I looked at these two buildings that used to be homes for veterans. And then the VA got a huge grant and built the building across the street. So these two buildings were side by side and vacant. And we looked at it not last summer, but this past summer, but the summer before. And the price was too high. We walked away. And then we know another group that we do a little business with, and they put these two buildings under agreement at a reasonable price a year later. And then they called us when they were like a week before the closing, and they were like, we have two buildings, we don't have any operators, and we're on the hook for $1.1 million. And we've already passed the closing date, and we're into our 30-day extension, and our $50,000 deposit is at risk, and we're paying $200 a day for a premium. And so, we were like, okay. So, I was like, well, this building, we know we've been in those two buildings. Like, you have them under agreement. I'll buy that building off of you. You can assign it to me. I'll do that because I have an operator already who's already been in that building. It's like, so I'll take one of those buildings, but like we closed on that building July 3rd. The guy's been in there for 2 or 3 months, and they still have the other building. And, and we took them out of half of the deal, which was great for them. But like, they still don't have an operator for their other building. Like, they've owned this building since July. July, August, September, October, it's almost November. They got 3-4 months worth of mortgage payments and carrying costs, and they don't have an operator. So that's why we're very pointed in find the operator first, not find the building first.
Yep, those were licensed boarding houses too. Those were good. They already had sprinkler systems in it.
Yep,
they were pretty good. That was the first time for Michael, if he's still on here. That was the first time operator that we did that with.
Yep,
first time operator.
Yep.
And he's saying he can speak briefly with me about subject 2. Leaning into your general knowledge of real estate and years experience with bonus depreciation phasing out, does it still make sense to pay for cost segregation studies once it is gone?
That's a question for your CPA. So cost segregation study, Dan, for you and for other people, is they do a cost study, and you can actually take some advanced depreciation based on IRS guidelines. So if you've got a building that's worth $3 million, or $2.7 million, you're taking $100,000 a year over 27 years, which is what you can do on a building now. They can come in and assess the building and go like, oh, I'm going to take this advanced depreciation, and you could take 350, 400, 500,000 the first year or the second year. But you have to pay people who are certified to come in and do a cost analysis on reconstruction of the building. We've looked at it on the MGEM side, and the guidance we've gotten from our CPA is it wouldn't do it for a building that it has less than $1 million to $1.5 million that you paid for, because the numbers, you're going to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 to $10,000, $12,000 for this study to get these numbers. So it just doesn't make any sense on a $500,000 building to do that. If you could take it and there's a reason for you to take it, that would be great. That's a strategic question that has to fit in with the rest of your business. Like, I guess my question to the person who asked this question is, why would you want to take the extra depreciation? Is it because you're trying to offset income somewhere else? That's kind of one time or a couple of years. And if that's the case, that could be a very good tax strategy. Like if you sold the building and you've got a pretty good sized gain and you want to offset it, great. If not, I guess the question would be, why would you take the depreciation up front? Are you just trying to get the extra deduction? And my last question, I don't know the answer to this because I'm not educated enough in it. If you take extra depreciation on a building and then sell it, does that have any sort of a forward impact on the next person? I wouldn't think it would, but those are all questions that you and your CPA would have to sit down and look at. And you'd have to sit down with your CPA because that's a question that goes to the rest of your tax situation, right? People say like, what should I do on my W-2? You know, I make $80,000 a year and this is what I claim. What should I do? And my question always to them when I used to do people's taxes and work is, I need to know the rest of your tax situation. What else do you have for income? What else is coming in? I can't answer a question in a vacuum like that. So,
I mean, I can jump in on that if you want, if that's all right, Dan and Peter.
Go ahead, bro.
For the
Yeah, go ahead.
PAP. Yeah, so some of the people I work with, they're looking for private money partnerships. And because they are they own businesses, I was talking to Dan about it earlier, they have significant amounts of income coming in this year.
Yep.
And they want to do cost segregation studies primarily for the reasons you said, to be able to protect the money from Uncle Sam when he comes to knock in. They
Yep.
sink the money into real estate. They take advantage of the advanced depreciation. Can't even say that word today. It's been a long day. Then they do the cost segregation studies and they get to write off, you know, $500,000, $1 million straight away. You are right, though. If they do then study in advanced depreciation, but it doesn't impact the next person that takes it off. That said, not an accountant. Don't take my advice for it, of course.
yeah, no, that's exactly right. You have a lot of high net worth people who will, as Dan said earlier, they like investing their money in real estate because they're like, yeah, this building's probably going to make money, but I'm going to get a K1 that's going to show a loss because I'm going to have that depreciation. And I'm using that to offset this other income that I have. So a lot of these high net worth people will invest in like, yeah, I have $500,000, $1 million, a couple $1 million that I'll invest in this and I'll take 7, 8, 9, 10% interest on it, knowing that I have to recognize the income on the interest. But like, tell me like, hey, this is a big build out. You're doing a $900,000 build out and you know, you can decide with your tax account, do I put that into the basis of my building and write that off over 27 and a half years? Or do I take it and write it and shove it all to my P&L? And you have to have that conversation with your CPA because there's guidance on that with how much work you do and how much of it should be capitalized and how much of it should you can write off directly.
Beautiful.
Yeah, if I could talk briefly, just also got to worry about is the recapture once that's sold.
Yep.
So if you wrote off this huge amount and your exit strategy is to sell in 2, 3, 5 years, and you've bonus depreciated that, you will get recapture on all that write-off you already did in that first 2, 3 years if you bonus depreciate it. Yep. That's standard depreciation at 27 and a half years, that at least that I've found, is it's just the more streamlined year to year, you're taking that off and you're not going to get recapture. So
yeah, and you can add to that if you're not doing a 1031 exchange where you don't get to roll. I mean, if you're doing a 1031 exchange, you're like, okay, I'm going to roll the capital gain anyway, so okay, that's fine. But if you're not, that could exacerbate your tax issue and make it worse. And then all of a sudden you saw this building, you're like, what do you mean I have to write a X $100,000 check to the federal government because I sold this building? Yep, that's a question you really got to, and you should have those conversations with your CPA before you start to take action on selling something or doing something, not after. Your CPA is not a magician. He can't fix something for you after you've already done it.
Right. And I would highly recommend for people to get, the difference between a tax strategist and an advisor and a tax preparer. That took me a couple of years to learn the difference. Yep. And having an actual tax advisor or strategist that's going to guide you through the year within your purchases. Yep. And coach you, like Peter, and Dan saying about consulting them when you're making the purchases. What are my tax benefits? Is it better to bonus depreciate? Like I just bonus depreciated a Section 179 on a, over 6,000 pound vehicle.
Yep.
But it made sense for me in my tax rate. And that was all advised by my tax advisor. And not just a preparer that's slapping you on your butt $250 and sending you out the door. You have to have a real professional that does this for a living. And their goal is to save you money on your taxes, not just prepare it.
Yeah, that's good. I try to put together friggin' home run deals and then pay people to handle all that shit.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dan's real good at going, I have this really great deal. And then he stands like downstairs like a pitcher Dan. He goes, hey, honey, I'm just going to chuck this upstairs to your mother and father to do the rest of it. Here
That's
you go.
exactly what I do. I just fucking just go out, search for it, and then have. But you know, it's good because then I focus all my time on finding operators, find deals, find operators, find deals. That's like what I do, and then in the back end. But you have to have a whole team to do it, or you're going to get lost.
That's how our team works. Works well.
When is your flight, Peter? When do you go to board?
I have to board at 8:59. The boarding's going to start. They haven't started calling yet, so
All right, we'll go through this real quick. There's a few more questions there, but I can handle those. Mike's on here. Mike found an operator. I briefed you a little bit on this in Georgia. He did his, cold outreach. I actually got on the phone with the operator. I talked to him again today. Cool dude. Mike, I'll kind of quickly, obviously, explain that deal and what we went over. And you were on the phone with me, so you heard it, kind of how we put that together.
You said explain the deal?
Yeah, like talk to Peter about it like he's never heard it, and the other people.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I just like I've said, I've had I have a good bit of time on my hands, so I've just started making phone calls. I didn't email. I just started making phone calls to operators and seeing if they were interested in scaling. And as soon as they said yes and asked what do I mean, I shared the model, and he totally understood the model. He got it. We talked through some details as far as, what terms could look like. And because of me being so new, I didn't get into too many of the details, with the numbers, but I just kind of teed it up and said, I think it'd be best to bring in my partner who really understands the numbers and has all this experience up in the North. Because I was transparent. I just said, look, I haven't never done this, but I'm kind of the boots on the ground looking for opportunities now in Georgia. They're looking to, expand and take this to other parts of the country. And he understood it. He has business acumen, and I think he has 4 or 5 of these going already. And
so he gets
been
it.
doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, totally got
so
it.
Mike, what are the terms of the deal, Mike? What did you talk to them about?
Yeah, we talked about a 5-year lease, and he could do 10 to 12 units, 10 to 12 beds, excuse me. And he charged, at the time, he charged $250 during the call with Dan. He started thinking about it, and I was like, I'm probably going to charge $200 a bed because I'm going to be having like 4 guys in one room and be hard to charge them $250. So, but long and short of it, we ended up at, I think, $4,000 a month. Dan started at like 5,200 or something like that, and
I think I said like 48, which is interesting though, because Peter, 12 beds at, hold on, I don't know where the feedback's coming from. 12 beds, right, at 200 a week, right? So net operating income 10,400. I started right around $5,000. And we ended up on 4. So that whole, what Peter said, 45%. And just so you know, I didn't even use that model. I just went off of what I'd want my return to be. It always equals that because I've done it so many times. So now we have the decision, do we want to do the deal? Because there are better returns out there. But, purchase price 365, been on the market 35, 40 days, could probably do lower. But that's kind of where we're sitting, Peter.
What's it need for rehab?
Less than 10,000.
Yeah, about 10.
Right. So you're talking, what did you guys agree at? Like you came down to like 4,200? Is that what you said?
4,000. He said he didn't feel comfortable going over 4.
Okay, and he's triple net. He's paying all his utilities and taxes.
Nope, he doesn't want to. He wants to be all in for 4. Taxes are like $400 a month over there.
Yeah, so you're looking at a quick calculation. You're looking at roughly around a $1,900 to $2,000 mortgage payment. You got $400 in taxes. So you got a building. Let's say your insurance on the building is going to be a couple $100 a month. You're still going to have probably somewhere around $1,300, $1,400, maybe $1,500 a month return on your cash. So,
and that's after you pull all 350 out.
Correct. And so even if you did a quick calculation, I'm going to put 20% down, I'm going to put $70,000 down, and I'm going to make 18,000. That's a pretty good return right there. You're above 20%. You're You're
Yeah,
above
it's like
20% there.
24, 25%.
Correct. So, and then you pull all your money out, like not a bad first deal. You know, and he's negotiated well for himself. Dan and I have always found that the guys that negotiate or the women that negotiate more and push back are generally better business people. And you know, you make that decision like, okay, well, I'd really like to make I'd like to make closer to $2,000, but this guy's going to make some money and this should be good. I'll do the deal with him because it's pretty low risk because he's got four or five other properties and he knows what he's doing. But you know, if it goes well for him, you could do okay. The next time you do a deal, you go like, hey, we can do all this, but you got to pay your own taxes. Like I gave you a deal on the last one. You got to kind of come to the table. Then he or she has to go like, I'm not going to do that. If we're not going to do the same deal, we're not going to do the same deal. Well, I'm not going to do the same deal because it wasn't a great deal for me. But yeah, not a
Yeah.
bad deal. Something I would definitely move forward with it. However you guys decide.
Yeah.
And it's a good first deal too. It's a small deal. You know, it's not 7, 8, 900,000, $1.5 million. It's with an operator who's got other properties in the area, so they understand the game. Right, they're in the game. They know what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of positives to it.
Yeah, because you know it's 12 beds. He's limited. His income's 10,400. Like,
yep.
Charging anybody more than 50% of their operating income is not going to work. Now you can make
Correct.
an argument, well, why don't we wait until we find a house that can do 16 beds? Well, he doesn't really want to do more than 16 beds, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, do we wait and try to find a $250,000 house that can work? Well, what about the rehab? Because you know, if there's 30 grand in rehab, that can get the neighbors wondering what's going on. There's all these different factors that go into it.
Yep.
Like the house we got 5,500, 6,000. Like I bought a house for 285 grand. We put probably 50 into it, maybe less over Euclid, and we got $6,000 a month in rent. But that's because there's 22 beds. His operating income is way higher, right?
Yep.
So these are the calculations that you want to do. It's a pretty good first deal. Would we do the deal? Would you do the deal? Me and you?
Talking to Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again, Dan. Sorry, they just started boarding us. I didn't hear you.
Would we do the deal if it
Sure,
was?
we do the deal.
Okay.
We could, you know, we've talked about this, and this will be my last kind of comment. I'll have to go get on the plane. You know, we get involved and do the deal. We could have a conversation about, you know, the guy that is bringing the deal to us. Do we set something up and give him part of the ownership? Does he get paid a consulting fee based on the value of the lease? Like we're open to having conversations about being flexible at how that works, right? We're all about finding deals and helping people do this, and not, you know, like we don't need to be the guys that own everything all to ourselves. Like there's anybody that's done any research in this, and it's 46.5 million people according to the federal government in recovery in the United States. So you know that number's low. You know, 1, 2 house like this, there's just so much opportunity out there for people to do this the right way. You know, it's crazy.
Beautiful.
So, but I'm gonna get on the plane.
Yeah, let's talk then.
Dan, happy to get on any more calls. Just let me know. And sorry I had to rush off, but I do need to get to where I need to get to. I don't want to be at JFK all night.
No, yeah. All right, be safe.
All right, bye everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Oh, look at that. We closed the deal. See, Mike, you got to trust me, bro.
There you go, guys. That's how you do it.
Close the deal on myself. Because that's how it's fucking done, dude.
He didn't want it. He didn't want to do it.
Nah, I just didn't have the right time. I knew he was flying to Ohio. He's more old school than me. I'm like, do the deal, put it together. Like, you know what I mean? I just throw the fucking opportunity at the wall. But then I have a team of people who have to like put it together. So a lot of times they're just like, slow down, slow down, slow down. But you know, if I slow down too much, they're like, where are the deals? Right? Because they don't really know. Peter's awesome. He's the best dude. I couldn't do this without Peter. And we have his wife, Joanne, is who runs our books. We'd be fucked without her. So like, it's all relative, but everyone kind of has their piece. You know what I mean? Of the responsibility. Because out of the 20 something deals we've done, how many have I found? Probably 19 of them, right? But how many have I done the banking relationships? 0. Just don't fucking care. Like, I mean, I would care if I didn't have a team of people to do it, but that's how you kind of have to scale. You have to have people in place, but I'll run through. So we'll talk about that. You know what I mean? Because I want to get the deal done. I'll make some money, which is cool. You'll probably retain some ownership, maybe get a piece of the lease. You can put a check in the group, you know, because just so you guys know, typical 4%, is pretty standard. So if it's a 5-year lease at 4,000, right? 48,000 a year times 5 years multiplied by 0.04. You're looking at Michael get a commission check for like $9,800 on a deal like that, or potentially negotiate some sort of ownership in the property. That's very real. I mean, if it was 5,500 a month, $6,000, it'd already be under agreement. I already would have done it. But for us, I'm not being a douchebag, but like 20%, 22, 25% cash on cash return. It's just not like something that makes me jump up out of bed and fly to Georgia. That's just the reality in this particular model. Unless it was 25% of 10 million, right? It's all relative on that. So, but Mike went out, met an operator, did it. I got on the phone with him, talked to him. We helped put it together. Now Peter's involved, and we'll probably go down there and do that deal, and he'll be the first one to get a 5-figure check from this free group. It's completely free for you. School cost me $99 a month, and the Zoom call isn't free either. It's like, what do they charge you, like $12 a month or something to go over 40 minutes? But anyway, what were some other questions in here? When starting out, Karen asked a good question. Since we are doing the build out and the operator has not paid, since we are taking all the financial risk, what if they back out and change their mind? It's an issue if they do that. I'll never deny that. I don't know if she's still on the call or not, but that's a huge fucking issue. You know what I mean? Haven't run into that a lot. I did it recently. I just lost the deposit recently because someone didn't back out of the deal, but we negotiated everything. And then a week before the closing, he's like, yeah, I just think actually, if I want to do this, I want 50% equity in the property. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Like, you just coming out of left field. Like, we were talking about like who pays the trash bill on October 3rd, and now it's October 22nd, and you're on here talking about you want 50% of the property and like some sort of like property management fee. Like, this guy had no idea what he was talking about, so you can get burnt doing this stuff. And we typically go in order to get the properties and lock them up and make sure we get the deals, we do a lot of, we do our own inspections typically. I don't have a lot of financial contingencies on the properties because, it sucks when you lose $5,000 on a deposit, but what's worse? When you get a fucking fire ass property that can make $3,000 a month and you fucking lose it because you didn't want to risk the 5 G's, now that all depends on your financial position too. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying be an idiot, but at the same time, if you do set 15 deals and 13 of them go well, if you were a gambling man, you'd say, keep gambling. Right. So that's sort of, kind of our mindset about that, because cash and very few contingencies goes a long way. And you might, by doing it that way, we might save 20 grand on this building, 60 grand on this building, 80 grand on this building. Then I get fucked a $10,000 deposit. It stings, bro. It stings. But that's kind of the game we play. And again, it typically happens at scale more than it happens when you're strategic. Patrick says, when starting out, how should we vet operators? Like, if the operator already has many houses, should you stay away? Yeah, honestly, there's some truth to that. When people have 10 or 12 houses that they're leasing all of them, I'd be very careful of that, because now, like, it depends on who they're leasing from. Like, do you have month-to-month leases? Do you have 1-year leases? Like, what happens if 5 of your houses, the owner of the property decides that he doesn't want to lease to you anymore? Do you have employees? Is that going to fuck your whole business up? So yeah, most sober house operators, it's either their first one or they own 1 to 3. And then you can ask them, how are you dealing with that? If you were to lose one of those houses for whatever reason, what's that kind of look like for your business? Are you screwed? So these are all the questions you can ask. Someone who already owns sober living, better than someone who doesn't. But I've told the people who own a lot of them, or they run a lot of them, it's very, very difficult to manage all that. And usually the bigger game they talk, oh, Dan, I want to do 20 houses with you in the next 15 months. Run from people like that, because it's just always fugazi from my experience. The people who are kind of like Ty, who were like, the guy we were dealing with Mike, he started at 3,500 a month, and it didn't take long. What would you say? Until I said, yeah, 3,500, it just doesn't make sense for us. He went right to 4. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't take long and then we end up right in that model, because I fucking know their numbers just as good as they do. So him being like, 4 is the max I can pay. Yeah, I know you can pay 40% of your income, because I've done this a million times. So like, it always just ends up in the same spot. It's just so much better when they're income,
Checkers.
That's kind of how it is. Victor said, what are the benefits of buying a boarding house compared to regular residential? Zoning. Zoning. If you can get something that's already licensed as a boarding house, it already beat one of the hottest zoning things in the world. Odds are they wouldn't be able to open another boarding house in that area. Like Cassandra owns a boarding house in Alaska. I could be wrong, but I'd be willing to bet $1 million if one of the multifamilies next door tried to apply for a license to put a boarding house in that same neighborhood, they deny it because they don't. Fucking boarding houses are horrible, like they're not. But like on average, the overwhelming majority of them are difficult to manage and run by slumlords. I've owned rooming houses that were run great, and they still were what they were. They're high cash flow, they're tough to manage, they're great, but like cities in general have a gripe with them. And if you look at the overwhelming majority, they have a reason to. Unlike sober living, where people have a gripe with them because 2% of them are human trafficking people out of it. I mean, it can happen, just like it can happen in any. I mean, the majority of crimes committed in a city aren't in sober living or even boarding homes. It's some guy beating up his wife right in a fucking single family home. That's the majority of crime in most cities. So let's see, anything else? Can Mike share the term deals? We did that. What is the square footage of the house for 12 beds? That's a great. Oh, Mike already answered. 2,200. Is that what it is? 2,200? 2,300. And if anyone watched the video, I typically say 200 per square feet. So if it's a 12-bed sober house, typically you want 2,400. So that checks out, pretty
And
much.
there was space in the basement that I'm pretty sure wasn't accounted for as well.
Yeah. So it was a bigger, this guy just doesn't want to stuff the house, which I can respect that. I can. He's the one who has to run it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we easily could have put 16 in there, maybe even 18, like changing the dining room around. And his thought was, I want to keep it more familial. I want to
Really
have,
devastating.
for them to have a place to have camaraderie. And he's like, you get guys, 16 guys in a house and don't give them any space to enjoy each other's company. Things happen. So
There is truth to that. There's also the neighbors like, what? 16 people? Oh my God. They start freaking out. My kids' bikes are going to go missing from the street. It's like, dude, no one's stealing your bike, but I can sort of understand it. I know Michelle asked a good question too. Let me see. Where was it? Or maybe I already answered it. Do operators charge more per bed in areas where rent is higher in general? Yes, but only to a certain extent. For example, Nashua, New Hampshire is 30 miles, 40 miles north of Boston. They get $225 a week. The real estate is 1/3 the price of Boston. Boston gets $275 a week. So you go up 15% in costs of sober living, and the real estate goes up 300%. So the numbers just don't work as good in Boston. Now, the numbers can work in Boston if you own the real estate. If you're an owner operator, if you lease from a mom and pop landlord who's owned the property since your grandfather was in fucking diapers, then yeah, they have all this equity in the property and it makes sense. But like for me to come into, whatever the most expensive place in Utah is and buy a multifamily, it's going to be tough because at the end of the day, the majority of people living in sober living are going to be working, maybe not minimum wage jobs, but they're going to be working lower paying jobs. And Dunkin' Donuts in Boston pays the same as, or very similar to Dunkin' Donuts in Athol. Only the price of housing is a quarter in that area. So that's why typically men's sober houses do better because men are, well, first of all, 70% of people, who are addicted to drugs and alcohol are men. And then also men have the advantage, for the most part, women can do this too, but men have the advantage of getting out of detox, tattoos on their face, go make $35 an hour, fucking lugging bricks up a hill in the snow. Like a lot of women aren't going to do that. So they have the ability to make $35, $40 an hour, whereas it's a lot more difficult for women to do it. Typically, women's sober houses are just harder. The women can be, my heart breaks because my wife was, a drug addict. Women in general is hard because when you're in that drug world, we'll leave it at this. Women can always make money. And with that comes like a lot of trauma and just a lot of, they get beat up in this world. Men do too, but women get really beat up in the drug game, and it's devastating to see. But from an investment standpoint, typically the men's houses are a little more stable, but I own many that are women's houses. I just go off the operator, but a lot of people who own both, and there are women out there who own both, and they're always like, God, it's a fucking women house. It's driving me nuts. It's all relative, but I've never operated either of them. So I can't give my opinion on it. But anyway, thanks for an awesome. She has to jump. Had an 18,000 square foot group home fall in my lap. Wow. It's pretty cool. Do you install the sprinkler system during the rehab process, or do you wait for the city to say something? That's a great question. I usually wait. That's me. I don't know if Mike likes to hear that, but I like to. You know what it is? I'm happy to put the sprinkler in right away. The problem is when you try to do things the right way, you open the door to them not doing things the right way. Does that make sense? Like, I don't give a fuck if I have to put a sprinkler system in or a fire alarm. What I care about is them coming in and being like, oh no, this is a boarding house, and starting that whole crap where they don't know what they're talking about. And then I have to go sue them. Whereas if I just get it open and I operate, now they're going to come at me with one or two ways. Hey, dude, you need to put a sprinkler in here. Yes, sir, ma'am. No problem. We'll take care of it. Or they say, hey, you need a sprinkler here and you're operating in a legal boarding house. So it's like, okay, I'll put the sprinkler in and we're gonna start fighting this in court. The difference is I already have the operator in there paying me income every month. So I can fight that battle with operating income and not holding it. So it's not that I don't want to do things the right way. I just don't trust these cities to play fair. So, I always recommend buy it, fix it up, keep your mouth shut, start operating, see what happens. Most of these certification processes, like the Georgia Association of Recovery Residences, the New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences, all of these certification processes, they have their own, they're not involved in zoning, but they have their own stuff. They make sure you have egress windows. They make sure you have interconnected smoke detectors. So as long as they get certified, the house is going to be safe for people to live in. I'm not saying stuff a bunch of people in a basement and do it in a way that's dangerous. You'll never get certified if you do it that way. It's just when, and from my experience, the fire department's cool because they don't give a fuck about zoning either. They are life safety code, which is fine. It's the zoning and the neighbors when they start that crap. Oh, you're running a halfway house. Nope, it's not a halfway house because we don't treat on site. It's that simple. And when you start to know what you're talking about, they're like, oh crap. It's easy to beat. But if they're holding your permit for 6-8 months, you're gonna win the war. But I hope you got cash to hold on. It's not a good first deal. But Joe, I see you're in here, dude.
Yeah, buddy.
My friend, later.
How's it going?
It's going good. So you're gonna buy a property and operate it, right?
Yes, sir.
I own a property in Ashtabula, Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, on West Ave.
This is on Park, right around the corner from West.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a nice property.
Yeah, it is. If I can get it for the 125 that I offered, it's going to be even better.
Blocking a quarter. It's pretty nice. I expected it to be a dumpster fire on the inside. It was pretty fucking nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Not much to do. Couple of things, but not much.
Can I pull it up on here? I don't think anyone in this Zoom call is going to steal it from you. Can I do that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me share the screen. You cannot minimize Zoom while you are recording. Oh, come on. All right, I'm going to end it.